Welcome to another episode of Beyond the Details. Today we're looking at a Nissan Z432, which is basically a Japanese market 240Z, but has a Skyline engine in it, which means double overhead cam, 3 carburetors, in this case Weber's, and 4 valves per cylinder. Plus, it's right-hand drive and has magnesium wheels and a lot of other neat features that only this car had. There were only 420 of these made, so it's a pretty exclusive club that we're dealing with today. In today's episode, we're going to just clean the outside of the car. I want to spend a little bit of time in the engine compartment, and you'll see why as we progress. It is an absolutely beautiful piece of machinery. The car has been in storage for a very long time. It's very dusty and just hasn't been driven. We want to freshen it up, get it ready for the next set of driving coming into spring now, and we'll have this thing ready to go. So the first thing we're going to start with is just a simple dusting off. We're going to start with the paint. We'll get that all cleaned up. And then I think we'll probably start detailing the engine compartment, so you get a little taste of all that. So let me get started. Unfortunately, it uses a lot of product because there's so much dirt on this car, as you'll see. One thing I do want to point out, in my business, I do a lot of very, very expensive cars. And a lot of these cars, especially from the 50s and 60s, tend to leak. So I never wash a car. In fact, I never put a hose on anything because I just had to clean all that stuff up later. I use quick detailers all the time. I've never had an issue scratching the paint. And a lot of these cars, it's a lot easier to work the paint versus trying to bail 2 gallons of water out of the interior of a Testarossa. So I tend to use a lot more product when it gets this dirty. But it definitely works, and it allows it to clean up very quickly. I'm going to get down here and do the quarter. When you're using the quick detailers, I always fold it into quarters. So use the really dirty side first and then flip it over and use the dry, cleaner side to buff. Earlier we were cleaning around the front badge. We're going to end up just taking that badge off because it's never been cleaned underneath. At the same time, I'll show you how to refinish the black background and make it really clean and sharp before you put it back on. So we've taken the badge off the front of the Z432. Now it's time to just fill in the white field here on the Z, and we're also going to fill in this ring. It seems that half of the paint has been chipped off. So we don't really use too many fancy things to get this done. It's more in the using simple paints. This is a model paint that we use a lot. What I like to do is just to decant a little bit on top of this that we can just use for a palette. And then we'll take a little bit of the white paint. These brushes are great, by the way. These are just disposable brushes. You get them in packs of 100. This way when you're done with them, you just throw them away. So the idea here is to fill in. You don't have to be an artist to do this. Okay, so we just take a little bit of the white paint, just basically fill in the void where the white paint had been flaked off. Now we're going to twist it around, switch to the black. And this is a flat black, actually a semi-gloss, which matches the tone in the badge itself. So if you get outside the lines, it'll still look good. I've mixed the paint and put a little bit in the cap, and we just like to work out of the cap instead of dunking it into the bottle. Get a lot more control that way. So it does seem sort of ridiculous to go to this level of preparation, but this is what separates a car that's being prepared for concours versus a car that's just being cleaned. We're going to reapply this, and then there are small clips on the back that we'll address in a minute. You won't see that part because it's hidden under the hood. So just to make sure it goes on nice and smoothly. Okay. So now we're going to focus on this front bumper. And obviously, since it's been sitting for a few years, it does have some light rusting in it. It also has some very nice bird droppings that we're going to take off first. So what I want to start with, I always try to use the least invasive way of cleaning things. And in this case, we're going to start with basically a glass cleaner. I like these aerosol glass cleaners. I like the way they foam up and they sort of get the dirt going a little bit. So we're starting with this. And now you can see we've got some surface rust breaking through. The nice thing is this, unless it proves me wrong, the steel wool should take this right off. I use the glass cleaner again as a lubricant. Always go in straight lines, short strokes and straight lines. And the reason for that is if you pick up a piece of dirt, you only have to polish a section about this long as opposed to getting something this long. Or if you do it in circles, you end up getting this kind of effect. I don't want any of that. I want it to be the same finish all the way across and the same pattern all the way across. Now before I wipe this off, I'm going to take our trusty bamboo stick and just work some of these little edges just to get them going. Okay, we're just going to take a couple little spots here. Again, just a hint of glass cleaner. Take the steel wool and knock out these last remaining rust spots. All right, there we go. Now we may come back in a little bit. There's still a couple little tiny specks here and there. But for the most part, this did a really great job of cleaning the top surface. One of the things I wanted to point out too when doing detailing like this is make sure you know what you're working on. A lot of times, like mid-70s Mercedes and BMWs and that sort of thing, they had anodized aluminum. They didn't have chrome. And you certainly don't want to use something as aggressive as steel wool on that because it'll take it right off. So make sure you know that it is chrome or stainless, both of which would respond well to something as aggressive as this wool. But if you were to work this on a piece of aluminum, you'd really regret it. Try cleaning up that rust spot a little bit more. Definitely takes the edges off of it, so it makes it look better. Funny thing, once you start this process, there's no turning back, basically. So once we've polished this front bumper, the first thing I'm noticing is this bottom edge of the hood now is reflecting into it. Well, when the bumper was dirty, it worked out to our advantage. We never saw that. But now that we've actually created a mirror to look into the hood, we have to start doing these little extra things. Now that we've finished wiping down the exterior, it's time to move on to the engine compartment. So far I showed you how to polish the chrome, taking out some of the rust stains. I'd like to move into the engine compartment now because there's a whole lot of things to look at in there, plus a lot of different materials are being used. So let's get started. This thing is glorious. I mean, you don't see this kind of thing in any Z car, let alone in any other car. This is basically the Skyline engine. This one in particular, it's got more modern Webers on it instead of the standard Mikunis, but that really doesn't detract from the overall performance. In fact, it probably runs a little bit better the way it's tuned. We're going to start out with a basic degreaser, but I'm not going to be spraying. This car is actually pretty good. It doesn't need there's not a lot going on in here. Carburetors have a little funk on them, but we can clean that up. I don't want to get into places where it doesn't need to be, which means if I sprayed it on the firewall and it drips onto the transmission, I won't be able to get to the top of the transmission to clean it off. So what's the sense of doing that? Just creating more work. We're going to get right to it. We're going to start with the cam cover. We'll come around the other side, we'll do the carburetors and the other end. Finally, we'll finish off by doing inside the hood. So we'll get started. A lot of times I will disassemble some parts, like I just popped these out of their holder so we can get underneath them. I'll take off certain components, like in this case I may take off the front of the air cleaner assembly because that'll give me access to this area down in here on the other side. But I try not to be too invasive, and I also know my limitations. I'm not taking things apart that shouldn't be taken apart. So I picked up a little piece of steel wool here. What this is going to do is just give us that sheen back. I don't want to use a polish on here because actually they come up with sort of a satin finish. The cam cover itself, it's difficult to see probably, but it's actually a wrinkle gray color, sort of like Ferrari uses their wrinkle black finishes on their cam covers. This is a wrinkle gray. And then these are machined off to give it that effect of being polished. But we don't want to go too crazy with the finish. We want to keep it sort of soft and warm the way it was from the factory. It doesn't look like it's chromed. Now the letters are machined in this direction, so I never want to go this way to clean them. I always want to go in the direction of the grain. That way it'll clean up faster. So one of the things you'll notice is that I didn't pull the wires out of each individual hole. It's really not necessary, and I don't want to disturb any kind of connection we have in there. I wanted to keep, and I also won't have to redo the firing order or figure out where each wire goes. So we want to keep it as, again, it's as least invasive as possible. In this particular instance too, these spark plug leads go way down into the middle of the head, so they're pretty long. And really all we need to do is to clean the rubber cap that's on the outside and clean each individual wire, and that'll give enough definition to the engine compartment. So the header itself has some heat staining in it, had some corrosion on it as well. I will not remove that, just my own opinion. I like that patina that's on these headers, a way overused word by the way, but it gives that original look you can't ever get again. I don't want to go in here and polish them because that just opens up a whole new can of worms where you really have to do them correctly, which means pulling it off. This will look really impressive once it's all completed. Okay, we're just about finished here, and I think we'll move to the other side. And then we'll start the process all over again. I'll take a look at that air cleaner assembly. Maybe we'll pop that off the front. But I think we're pretty good so far here. We'll go around, and I'll come back with some dressing too, because I want to do, I'll put some stuff on the rubber hoses just to give it a little bit more punch when we open the hood. I'm gonna use one of these big cotton swabs and load it up with some of the degreaser on it and get up underneath the light. This is basically a trouble light for working under the hood. It's a neat little switch on the back. Probably the biggest thing that I see that people miss, especially when I'm judging these cars, or judging, say, a Ferrari Club event where the technical aspects of the car are most important. Then you have to be really attentive to the hardware. That seems to be the biggest thing. Either a car that, see in this case, we have this yellow CAD hardware. It's very bright and yellow in tone, but in the early or the late 50s, that didn't even exist. So you see something like a gull wing, and half of it is yellow and half of it's white CAD, which would be incorrect. And that's the first thing you notice as soon as you open the hood as a judge. It's like, well, that stuff didn't even exist in the period. Why would it be on the car now? And I see that a lot. You open a hood even on a modern car. And it's really just simply replacing the hardware. You're talking pennies on the dollar. You can spend 40 bucks in hardware and do almost the entire engine compartment. So why not do it? And that really makes a huge difference. It looks like the car has been well preserved. It also makes a great presentation when you open the hood. Looks like the car was just delivered that way. Okay, so just moving on. As I mentioned earlier, I have a little bit of a dressing on here. It's a satin, very low gloss dressing. I use it on the vinyl parts, on the rubber parts, that sort of thing. It just gives you a little bit nicer finish and more definition in the edge compartment when you open the hood. Really makes it pop. So I put some on this foam pad. These are great for doing for applying waxes and that sort of thing, but I also find them great for doing small dressing jobs like this. So I'm going to work my way over here. We'll do the rubber boots on the intake, and then work our way this way. Do the plastic over here, maybe some of the battery, but you'll see as we go along that'll really give it some contrast under the hood here. Grab some more, another dressing, and a little bit of quick detailer to do the sides in here, give them a little bit more shine. And then we're going to just about button it up. Getting close to getting it done. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Beyond the Details. We got the Z car all cleaned up. It's ready for your cars and coffee. If you like what you see, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you next time on Beyond the Details.